Hello, welcome back. This week we are going to start talking about chapter 3. I'm going to go ahead and make this bigger real quick. I'll be flipping back and forth between some of our folders and everything and minimizing this picture. So we're going to briefly go over chapter 3 just so you're aware of some of the topics that you are going to see on your midterm. Some areas that you need to focus on when you're doing your reading. And then we have 3 assessments that we're going to be doing for chapter 3. And this chapter is where we're really starting to dive into kind of looking at ourselves a little bit more in depth and actually learning a little bit more about ourselves to help us in areas like increasing your study skills and basically learning ways that might actually be more useful for you when you're doing things like your homework, studying, test taking, things like that. So we're actually going to be talking about 3 different things. We're going to be talking about the theories of multiple intelligences, which basically is an assessment that kind of goes over basically areas in which you personally are smart. And that sounds kind of weird, but if you think about it, everybody has their strengths, right? Everybody has certain things that they're just better at than they are at other things. And so this assessment kind of goes over and actually puts some names and terms to areas of where you have your strengths. And then the next assessment we're going to be doing is called the VARC Learning Style Assessment. And that's actually an assessment that's going to narrow down your actual learning style in the areas of strength where when you are learning in a certain way, that's usually where you excel because there's certain ways that people take in information and it's easier for them to remember things. It's easier for them to learn in that manner. And a lot of times people in general know what their learning style is, but they don't necessarily have details about it. They just kind of have that feeling. They know they're better at learning in a certain way than others, but they've never really looked at it in the sense of, okay, this is a term for the way that I learn best. And here are some actual tools that I could use that could actually help me learn better and maximize my learning, maybe in areas that you've struggled in before because you've never really known that these are things that are going to help you with your learning in general. And then the third thing that we're going to go over is a very, very small scale Myers-Briggs personality assessment. And the reason that in this chapter, and the reason I have everyone do these 3 assessments, because if you think about it, all 3 of these things are all playing together in ways that you could potentially maximize the way that you're learning, studying, able to remember information, and then able to recall and use that information when it comes time to take tests, write papers. And a lot of students in this class, even though not every single assessment is necessarily perfect for everyone. Sometimes some people don't really like the way that their results turn out, or maybe they don't agree with it. And that happens because not every single assessment is always perfect for every single person. But for the most part, in general, most of my students have always really enjoyed this chapter because it gave them some more insight into ways that they could learn better and focus on those actual tools that are actually going to be more beneficial for them personally that maybe nobody had ever even mentioned or introduced them to before. And it just gives you some more tools for, oh, maybe this is going to actually help me out and make it easier for me to remember information, study better, and actually be able to do better on my tests. So starting in chapter 3, the first major section where you kind of need when you're doing your reading that you do want to pay attention and focus on is the conditions for learning. And these are the best conditions for learning. And so if you read through this, you're going to see, I believe there's 10 of them. Oh no, there's 7. I'm thinking of a different section. So there's 7 best conditions for learning. Read through those. You're going to see they're all numbered. They're all split up. And these basically, when you're reading through them, it's actually giving you some information on, if you really do want to learn better, if you really do want to be able to do better on your studying, your testing, these are the kind of, I guess you could say, goals that you want to go for in order to get yourself into that, frame of mind of, this is what I need to do to learn better. These are the kind of conditions that I need to try to reach for. So read through that because you're going to find some good information there that might make you think a little bit more about, okay, like these are the kind of things that I need to strive for in order to try to learn better. And then it really, rolls into, after page 62, we're going to go into the first assessment that you're going to complete, which is the theories of multiple intelligences, and it's a self-assessment. So it starts on page 63. Please be aware, because a lot of times people turn in only parts of these assignments because they don't realize that it goes over multiple pages. It goes from page 63 all the way over to page 65. So you have all of these different sections that you need to answer. It looks like this, and it goes over 3 pages. So make sure you complete all 3 pages. What you're going to find is there are 8 different sections. Each section, it has a term basically. So for example, the first one says linguistic intelligence. So the goal here when you're doing this assessment, so you complete it correctly and you actually get a better, I guess, idea of the areas in which you are most smart. When you are reading, it's going to say, like the first one, for example, linguistic intelligence. It's the capacity to use language to express what's on your mind and understand others. And so it's another term for it is word smart. And if you see, there's going to be about 8 different statements in each one of these sections. Read through each of these. The goal here is for every single section, you read through all the statements. There's a blank line right next to each one of these statements. If you read that statement and if it describes you, you're going to put a check mark there. The goal here, you can put a check mark by every single one. If every single one of those 8 statements in this section pertains to you, you can check all of them. If none of them pertain to you, then you would not check off any of them. And you're going to do that for every single section. So you check mark as many of those that actually describe you, maybe a way in which you learn, something that you like. It's going to have a bunch of different statements that are basically honing down different areas that are going to be where your strengths lie. So do every single one of those sections. There's 8 of them. Check off as many that apply to you when you're reading the statements. Don't check the ones that do not apply to you. And then what you're going to find on page 65, when you're on the very last page of this assessment, you're going to see at the bottom, it's got 3 blank areas. What you're going to do is go through all of your 8 sections after you've done all of your check marks and you've checked everything off. You're going to go through all 8 sections and you are going to write down the 3 sections that you had the highest scores in. So that's basically telling you, it's giving you a term and it's telling you specific areas of where your strengths lie in intelligence. And that's going to give you a good clue as to, basically, it's going to help you a lot when you're coming to like studying styles, things like that, because it's important to understand where your strengths are and maximize those to help you learn better. So make sure that you are finishing it out. Make sure you are writing down the 3 top areas. It is common for sometimes people to maybe have 4 because maybe 2 of the higher areas they have the same score in. So maybe you got an 8, a 7, and a 6. So if you have 4, it's okay. You can just go ahead and write down that 4th. If you have the same score for more than 3 areas, that's fine. Go ahead and write it down. That just means, you have even, more strength or a high score in, 4 areas. But in general, most people do have 3 that are their highest, that they've had the most check marks in. So make sure you're writing that down and then basically take your photo of all 3 pages, scan it, whichever way you've been doing it. So far, it seems for the most part, everybody has figured out how to do the pictures, how to scan and get it to upload properly, or some of you are writing these things out on notebook paper. And then what you're going to find after you finish this assessment, you're going to find on page 66 how you can tie in your results from the assessment. You're going to see a chart here. It's big red and orange chart that's on page 66. This chart is basically giving you studying techniques for those areas of strength that you basically specified on your exercise 3.2 on that first assessment you did. And it has some cool different ways that you could potentially try studying. If you've never tried one of these ways before, it may be something that maybe in an upcoming test that's coming up, maybe you can try this study technique to kind of maximize those areas of strength that you have. So let's just say, for example, that you checked off and you had the highest score in the logical mathematical section. It gives 3 different examples of studying using your results from that assessment. The first one is like create a hypothetical conceptual problem to solve when you're doing your studying, or the second one, organize chapter or lecture notes into a logical flow. Because if that's how your brain works, if your brain thinks logically, it needs to be organized, things have to be like that. It makes sense to take all your notes that you have. If there's any kind of chaos going on in your notes, rewrite them, organize them, make them go into a logical manner. And it's in the process of writing out your notes, you're essentially reviewing them, but you're also putting it into a logical flow, organizing it. And for your brain, that's really, it's kicking it in for you where you're actually going to, when you look over those notes afterwards and you start studying it, it's going to make more sense for you. And that's just an example because some of you are going to have different strengths in other areas, but it gives you 3 ways that you could potentially try something new if you've never tried it before that's going to actually fit in with your specific area of intelligence. And so reading on from there, we're going to kind of go into now talking about your learning style because that's talking about your areas, your strengths of intelligence. Now we're talking about your specific learning style, the way that basically your brain prefers to learn. And a lot of people know in general what their learning style is, but a lot of times they don't really maximize or use some of the other ways that their brain does also like to learn. So this assessment is called the VARK learning style. It's exercise 3.3. What you're going to find, it's on page 68. What you're going to find is all you're going to see for exercise 3.3 in the book is just the area for you to write your scores. So you will be submitting this after you take the assessment. You're going to take it online, but after you take the assessment, you're going to get a score for each 4 of these areas. You're going to write it in here, and then you're going to take a picture of this. Be aware, you have to do this online. You can do it on your phone. You can do it on your computer. It should work either way. I've looked at the link both on my phone and on my computer, and it just takes you to a regular web address. It takes you right to the questionnaire. You don't have to sign up for anything. It just basically, it has an online tool where you're clicking on everything. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to go to that actual VARK learning style link just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So let's put me over here. Okay, that's not what, there we go. I'm not tech savvy if you haven't already figured that out. Okay, so here we are. This is going to be exercise 3.3. So when you click on the actual assignment folder in the week 6 folder, you are going to see right here that I have the link. So basically, if you're in Canvas on your phone or on your computer, when you click on this assignment folder, you're going to see the link right here. So let's go ahead and click on it just so you can kind of see what it looks like when it loads up. It takes you right to the VARK questionnaire. And I don't know if it's, okay, good. I guess my face will pop back up, I guess, while it's pulling this up. So basically what you're going to see here, the VARK questionnaire, it's going to go right into the questions, and it's kind of the same concept as the other assessment. You are going to basically read your prompt. For example, this first one, I want to learn to do something new on a computer. I would, and it gives you these different scenarios. Same concept. If 3 of these apply to you, you check off all 3 of them. If none of them apply to you, you wouldn't do any of those things. If you were wanting to learn something new on the computer, then you don't check any of them off. But the point being is if there is more than one that describes you, you check off all of the ones that actually describe what you would do or a method that you might take in order to learn something new on a computer. So basically do that throughout this whole entire assessment. It's not very long. I mean, it maybe has like 20 statements. It's not terribly long. And what's going to happen when you finish it, and down here, when you click OK, after you've finished all of these, it's going to take you to your, basically it's going to have like the results of your assessment, and it's going to give you these 4 different areas. So for the VARK learning style, there's a visual, an area of learning that you may have strength in, oral for hearing. So basically, if you are the type that prefers to hear information and you actually retain better when somebody is speaking to you and you're hearing them tell you about it, that's a learning style. There's a read-write learning style because some people prefer to, like let's say there's, you're sitting in class and the professor puts, a PowerPoint or something up, and you actually prefer, even more so than listening to the professor talk about it, you prefer looking at the PowerPoint and actually reading the information and then maybe writing it down in your notes. That might be a learning style that's better for you. Maybe you don't really retain things when the professor is speaking, but you do better when you can see, examples of things where you can actually read it. And then the 4th area is kinesthetic, and that's more the people that are hands-on. They like to learn by actually breaking things apart, putting it back together again, or just in general being able to do something with their hands and be kind of physically active in the area of learning something. So in those 4 areas, after you complete all of these questions and check off all of the ones that apply to you, you're going to get a score for each of those 4 areas. So what you want to do, and I would recommend that when you are actually, after you write your scores in here for exercise 3.3 and you take a photo or scan this and submit it, also submit your, basically the page that you get after this when you submit your results. It'll tell you like a breakdown, and it does have some good information that you can read about, your learning styles and things like that. So I would recommend reading through all of the information that it gives you based off of your scores. And then go ahead and like do a screenshot of the actual results page and submit that with your exercise 3.3 out of the book where you write down your scores. So go ahead and submit both. And then that way I can kind of get a view of like your, assessment that you took. So that would be basically what you're doing there for exercise 3.3. And when you're doing your reading, you're going to read a little bit more after this point when you're on page 69. That's kind of talking about sensory preferences. And it's talking about things like multimodal learners, which is people that have maybe 2 areas of strength in their learning. And there's ways that you can basically kind of use both in order to maximize your ability to learn and be able to learn more, learn better. And you're going to find, I need to flip to the page because for some reason they kind of put it in a weird spot, because there is another study strategies that's based off of the VARC learning style. So it's very weird. You're over here on page 69, but over on page 77, you're going to see another chart that has study strategies based off your learning style. And what you're going to see is it's got one column that says everyday study strategies, and then the second column says exam preparation study strategies. So let's say on the VARC learning style, you scored really highly in the visual section. So if you're looking at these 2 different columns here, you could get some ideas of some study strategies that you could try for like your everyday study strategies to try to retain information and learn information better. You can read through those and see if any of them look like something like, oh, maybe I should try this. Maybe this would work well for me. And then you see that they have the exam preparation study strategies, and you can look at that based off of your area of strength in learning style and maybe get some ideas of ways that you could try studying based off of your learning style. So I don't know why they kind of put it so far away from where you actually take your assessment in the book, but that's where it's at. So you'll see that chart on page 77, and that ties into what you just did for the VARC learning styles. So let me go back to our Canvas page. All right. Okay, I'm going to go back to the main page in case I need to click on anything else here. Okay. Week 5, group projects. Hopefully those weren't too torturous for everyone. Okay. So going on with your reading. So if you're over on page 69, reading page 70, when you get to page 71 is where we're going to talk about the next concept, which is your personality. And how does your personality play into how you learn? Because it does. Everybody has kind of preferences of maybe they like to be around other people. Maybe they like to be solitary. Maybe you prefer quiet. Maybe you prefer noise, because everybody kind of has a different way in which they are more comfortable. They're able to learn better because whatever the surrounding environment is, it's more suitable for their personality. And that's good to really think about your personality when you're trying to think, okay, let's say, for example, your personality, you prefer to be alone. You don't really like studying or being in a group situation. You kind of like to do things on your own. Okay, well, if you like to do things on your own, maybe joining a study group is not going to be the best for you, because that just really doesn't suit your personality. You're not comfortable with it. You don't really want to have to depend on other people for being able to study. And that's just an example, but there's a lot of ways that you can think about it based off your personality, going, okay, maybe if I put myself into this situation when I'm studying or when I'm learning, it's going to benefit me more than just going into this situation because that's what everybody else is doing, because a lot of people sometimes will get together and make little study groups, but not everybody's comfortable with that. Not everybody learns well when they're put in that situation. So it's really good to recognize your personality and how you can make better decisions on, helping you learn better. So when you get to page 72, as you're doing your reading, you're going to see this is not actually an exercise in the book. This is one that I sort of made so you can do this very, very basic Myers-Briggs personality assessment. If you actually want to do the full Myers-Briggs personality assessment, you can actually go to Career Services on campus, and they have a ton of assessments that you can take. If you want help with anything as far as, you could do the learning style assessment. You can do the personality assessment. There's a lot of other ones, but they do have a lot of assessments that you can take that really help you out, especially if you're one of the students that's still kind of trying to figure out what it is exactly you want to do for a career, what would be a good fit for you. They have a lot of really cool resources like that at the Career Services Center. Just to let you know, but this is a very shortened basic version of the Myers-Briggs, but it gives you at least a little bit of clue. So what you're going to see, I'm going to make my face smaller again so we can go over here to this. I can never get that little notification off there because when I do, it makes the video go away. Okay, so when you click here where it says week 6 Myers-Briggs type indicator, when you click on that, this is actually going to be a discussion post. So it's going to basically explain to you to go to page 72 in the textbook. It's going to tell you to look at this little middle section. I know that my face is small, but you're going to see in the textbook, there's this little middle section here on page 72. And it's got basically 4 statements, and you have to choose between, there's 2 basically ways that you can answer that statement, and you have to choose which one most describes you. It may not be perfect, but just choose the one that best describes you. And, some people say, well, I'm both. And I mean, that's okay too. But in general, usually one or the other is more indicative of your personality. So let's just say, for example, the very first statement says, it's asking you a question. It says, what energizes you and where do you direct your energy? And so it gives you 2 choices. Do you get energy from other people? That would mean that you're more of an extrovert. Or do you go within yourself to find strength? And if that's more your personality, that means you're more of an introvert. So you're going to choose which one is most like your personality. And you're going to do that for all 4 of these questions. You're going to answer based off of mainly which one kind of goes along better with your personality. And I actually put it here as well, but that's where you find it in the book, is on page 72. So what you're going to do, since this is a discussion post, you're going to click on reply. And then you are going to answer these 4 questions, answer it whichever one of the 2 statements is most like you. And then, and you're going to do this all in the discussion post. And then you need to make sure that you answer these questions right here. And you have to think about how you answered these 4 questions for the personality assessment before you really answer these ones here that are in this little area in yellow. So if you read through it, it's asking you, after you've answered all 4 of the areas of the Myers-Briggs, it gives you these different questions. So like one would be, if you could choose the perfect work environment, not the perfect job, the perfect work environment for yourself, what would it be and why? So think about it. If you said you're more of an introvert than an extrovert, probably a better work environment for you would maybe be some type of job scenario where you're able to work independently. That's just an example. But basically tie in how you answered these 4 questions on the Myers-Briggs to these questions that I'm asking you here in yellow. So that way you're kind of answering it thoroughly. So really think about it and try to tie the 2 together when you're answering these questions. And that's basically all you're going to do. You'll submit it after you answer this part, letting me know which ones you choose for yourself, and then answering these questions based off of how you chose to answer the Myers-Briggs. You'll submit it, and that's going to be it for that. That is basically how you complete that one. But these 3 assessments are kind of giving you a good way to look at your areas, your strengths of intelligence, your learning style strengths, and then tying in how your personality could potentially play on, maximizing your learning. And if you tie all 3 of these together for yourself, you could potentially give yourself scenarios where you're really putting yourself in the best learning situation that you can be in, where you might be able to learn better, remember more of the things that you learn, be able to study better. So really look through those charts that I described for each of the assessments as well. And then the last thing in the chapter that I really point out, because you will see questions about it on your midterm, you will see questions on the midterm pertaining to these 3 assessments. So make sure that you're reading through the chapter and understanding what it is that these 3 assessments are getting at and some of that main information, because you will see questions on that. You'll see on page 76 down towards the bottom, there's a section that's called Becoming an Intentional Learner and Making a Master Study Plan. And on there are 12 points. So it goes all the way from page 76 all the way to page 80. Read through those 12, make a master study plan, because not only is that great information for you on how to basically make a master study plan and potentially really being able to remember information really well for your testing, but you will see questions on this on your midterm. So make sure you're reading through that section and going through all 12 of these. And if you're doing anything nifty, like using little sticky notes or anything as you're listening to the lectures when I'm telling you different areas of the chapters that will be on the test, that would be really smart. If you're not doing that, that might be something you want to start doing. But if you have little sticky notes, anytime I'm going through the chapter saying, hey, you'll see this on the test, if you leave yourself a little sticky note or something in your book, you'll actually be able to go back to it much more easily when you're taking your test. Gave you a little tip there. Anyway, and that's basically pretty much, that's the end of the chapter there. Chapter 3 is pretty cool. If you want to read this very last section in the chapter on page 84, it's basically a very small section of how to study when the heat is on. I do not recommend cramming for exams and things, because a lot of times you don't remember the most information by waiting till the night before your test to try to cram all of the information in. But it does have some pointers on, if you did wait to the last minute to study, here is some ways that you might at least be able to try to benefit yourself and try to remember more information. So if you are interested in reading that last section to get some more information, if you have put yourself in the position where you're going to have to cram for an exam, that's a good little section that has some pointers and tips there. And that is it for chapter 3. Basically, just email me if you have questions on any of these, but they're pretty self-explanatory and not too hard to get through. And yeah, that is it. And we will see you all next week.